Jamshid Sharmat spent the last 4 years in Iranian solitary confinement, where he was tortured and forced to make false confessions. In a trial widely condemned by human rights organizations as a sham, he was convicted of terrorism. Last month, he was executed. Sharmat was a German-Iranian citizen who was living in the US with his family until he was kidnapped during a layover on a business trip in Dubai by Iranian security forces. His daughter, Giselle Sharmat, campaigned relentlessly for her father's freedom and urged the German government to do more for his release. Today, I'm glad to speak with her. Giselle, you mentioned that you don't accept condolences for the loss of your father. Why is that?
We've seen the regime in Iran for 45 years. We know that we cannot trust anything that they say. So even claiming that my father is dead, I cannot take that as a fact unless somebody that we trust, somebody from the UN, from Germany, from America, would go there and see my father and find my father's body and bring him back to us.
What do you think are the chances of this happening?
I think the Islamic regime is feeling the pressure right now in a political sense. We know what's going on inside of the Middle East, but besides that, Germany has closed some of its consulates. There's pressure from the EU that's coming. We had elections in America with Donald Trump now having more pressure. So I think it is a good chance for all of these governments to finally come together and request that my father is being brought back and request that the other hostages are being brought back that are still held there. So hopefully they will step up their game now.
Given the fact that you receive threats as well, do you feel safe at the moment in the US?
No, it's not about my feeling if I feel safe or not. I mean, you get used to this paranoia that everywhere you go, you think like something can happen to you, somebody might poison you, somebody might hit you, something like that. You get very used to this kind of feeling. I've been told by authorities that my life is in higher danger. My lawyers are freaking out, my family's freaking out. I've seen the amount of threats on messages and so on that are coming towards me. We will get you too. We got your father. And that is the thing. If we don't show these terror regimes what the lashback is, if they kidnap one of us and take them there and do these show trials and murder them, if there is no consequence, if there is no end of diplomacy, end of trade, end of money transfers, end of anything, what holds them back from doing it to me, to you, to anybody else? And closing consulates will not stop the regime from hurting me, from kidnapping me, from assassination plots. We just saw an assassination plot in Canada against an advocate. We saw one in Berlin against Masih Ali-Nejad again. We saw President Trump getting assassination plots from the Islamic regime. Closing consulates is not going to stop that ever. It's not going to protect us. It's not going to push them back while we're still having business and still funneling money to the regime and still legitimizing them as a government instead of understanding this as a terror organization. And unless we show consequences, strong consequences, I don't mean some sanctions, I don't mean individuals, I mean what we did to Russia, I mean what we did to North Korea. We have to completely isolate them and we have to help the people to topple the regime. That we don't do for the people of Iran. That we have to do for our own freedom, so that we don't have to live under the threat of terrorism here in the West.
Do you think there was anything that could have been done to prevent your father's execution?
Of course, countless times. There were countless opportunities. I mean, the regime, when they kidnap an opponent, they have two options. Either they murder him right away because they wanted to silence him, or if they have the chance, they want to make money out of it. So that's where my dad was a double card. He was either going to be murdered if no government showed interest in freeing him, or he was going to be used for a big hostage negotiations deal. And we saw for 4 years how the US government and the German government and the European Union engaged in hostage deal after hostage deal after hostage deal after hostage deal and released at least 8 European prisoners, 5 Americans, and my father was left behind every single time.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock described your father's execution as a proof of the inhuman regime ruling in Iran. Chancellor Olaf Scholz called it a scandal, emphasizing that your father wasn't even given a chance to defend himself in court. How do you feel about these statements?
It's maddening when you hear that our chancellor for 4 years hasn't said a word about my father. I mean, good that there's public pressure that he had to make a statement, but look at the statement. The statement is not, this is a German journalist, activist, freedom advocate that was unlawfully kidnapped and taken there. The statement is, he didn't have a fair trial. My father has not broken any law. He has not done anything to anybody. He's a hero speaking up for freedom. Why would he need a fair trial? That was exactly the problem that we saw for 4 years with the German government, continually saying, if there is an execution, there will be consequences. There was never a statement, these are our hostages. We need to free them. Because once they use the word hostages, once they acknowledge that this is a hostage taking, that this is a kidnapping, there are treaties, international treaties, under which the German government, the EU, and so on must act. So that's why they're trying to avoid the H word, you know, don't call them hostages, prisoners, Iranians or something. Don't call them German hostages. Oh my God. That is the dirty part of the politics that is always hidden.
There are still other hostages in Iranian prisons right now, such as the German-Iranian Nahi Tarabi, who was also arrested in 2020. After your father's execution now, do you see any signs of change in how Germany or other countries are handling their policies towards Iran in light of these cases?
Absolutely not. Have you seen any changes? We are still the biggest business partner, Germany right now, Europe-wide. We're still treating these people as diplomats. Let me tell you about these diplomats. Asadullah Asadi was an Iranian diplomat stationed in the embassy in Austria. He was caught in Germany taking a bomb through Germany to Paris to kill people. These are terrorists. We need to get our hostages out of there. We need to close our embassies in there because the Islamic regime, after they gave my father the death sentence, threatened to hold the entire German embassy hostage. That never made the news, you know. We have to have a government that protects us from this threat and not a government that then maybe does a deal with the terrorists and engages in more hostage diplomacy. That is the cycle that we've been in for 45 years.
Many people cannot even begin to imagine what you and your family have endured over the past 4 years. Can you take us back to the moment you first learned about your father's abduction in Dubai? How did you find out, and what were your immediate thoughts and emotions back then?
I mean, it was in the pandemic. It was in 2020. I was about 5 months pregnant. I was working in the intensive care unit as a critical care nurse, which they turned into the COVID unit. So my horror story was that I get COVID by taking care of my patients, give it to my baby and lose my baby. So that was my own nightmare that I was going through. When I saw the Islamic regime's video that they published with my father blindfolded and forced to confessions, and knew that these people for years tried to murder my father here in America, tried to silence us, tried to silence other critics, I thought he's dead. I thought in that moment they had killed him. They had gotten him, made a video, and they killed him. So I was screaming at that moment. And then, of course, because I was pregnant, my family tried to calm me down. But even if there was like 1% chance that he survived, I was going to continue his fight. So we immediately started calling anybody. You know, there's no guidance of what to do when a terror regime kidnaps your father. Who do you call? The police? Interpol? Your government? The State Department? Like who? We called everybody. We had Interpol on the phone telling us, ma'am, we don't talk to people. We talk to countries, you know, please stop calling us. We had like State Department trying to get away from us. We had the Germans trying to get away from us. It was so hard, you know, to get help and to know where to get help from. You know where I got my help from? From other hostage families all throughout the world. The people who are silenced, the people who are not in the camera. They reached out to us and said, we've been through this for years. My loved one is in Afghanistan for 10 years. My loved one is in Syria for 3 years. My loved one is in Lebanon, in Iran, in all of those places. They were guiding me through the steps and what to do and what to take. And it's so horrific to see that we don't have a system in place when terrorists terrorize you, who to turn to. Who do you turn to when your governments are engaging with them? You have no one.
I have great respect for your tireless efforts and fight over the past years, which I have followed closely. How has this journey changed you as a person? I'm sure there is a Giselle before and after your father's abduction. How politically active were you before? And how do you see your role now?
I've been by my father's side every single step of the way. I've seen him. His office was in our house, so I would always see his shows and everything. I was his biggest critic. Me and my father were always head to head and discussing politics and this and that. I never understood what he was going through. I never understood how it affects your heart, the work that we're doing, how this pain affects your pain, affects how you think, affects what you have to do and what you're willing to do. I've seen many of the women life activists who were out there and now they're like, Giselle, I've been threatened. My family has been threatened. I can't do that anymore. And then I see people like my dad, whose life has been threatened, whose business has been threatened, who had to face assassins at our door, and who said, I'm not gonna give up. Even when they kidnapped him and took him there, they never broke him.
How many times were you able to talk to your father? And what was he aware of all this campaigning that you did for him?
So, because again, he was not a regular hostage, he was not in a prison where people could go or where he has like regular phone calls or other things or these perks. He was treated like, like the high-priced targets that they have. Like, he was held at an unknown location. The only time he was allowed a highly supervised phone call was when the regime wanted to give us information to pass to our governments for hostage deals, for any kinds of negotiations, or when they wanted to threaten us and put us into pressure. Like they wanted us to go on our laptops and install software that they can remote control it, or were dictating me letters to public statements that my father is a terrorist ringleader and whatnot, like all of their stuff that they were putting out there. They wanted to hold my father's life and pressure us to do it. 9 months, no sign of life. I wasn't allowed to talk to him for 2 years. And then in the last year, he had 2 phone calls, and this year, 1 phone call. And you try in that moment first to let him speak, because he gets ready. When you can't talk to your family, you can't talk to the outside world for a year, you think and you study in your head, when I get the chance, what am I going to say? How am I going to get this over without these people like knocking me off or stopping the phone call? So he was very, very skilled in coding messages to give it to us. And I was very skilled in trying to give him as much information about the outside world as he could possibly need, like there's a war going on, there's a women life freedom revolution, we're doing this, you have 500,000 signatures on this, everything that you can in a few minutes to let him know you're not forgotten, to let him know there's people behind you. There is horrible governments that abandon us, but there's good people there, good people that will continue this fight and be strong. And he was so strong in that.
Giselle, you've been fighting for your father all those years, and you still do after his tragic death. What keeps you going?
I have been very clear that I'm continuing my father's path, and that I will work very hard to take away all of the slander, all of the disinformation, all of the lies of the regime that is out there, and show what my father was doing. My father was also not, fighting for himself. He was in Germany. He grew up in Germany as a kid. He was 20 years in America. We have all of our rights. We didn't do it for us. We did it because we saw injustice. This is not our government. This is not our laws. This is not our people. This is not our ministries. Stop supporting them. So my father was doing it for them, and I was doing it for them. So for me, the path has not changed. The only thing that changed is I don't have to restrain myself that much anymore to think that what I say or what I put out there can threaten my father any more than that. That is one of the gloves that I have taken off. And with these gloves off, we will not be weaker, we will be stronger, and we will go forward until this regime and all of the complicit Western advocates will be held accountable.
Giselle, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.